of working men and 66% of working women work more than 40 hours a week. In my view, at the very least, what we have got to do as a family value is to guarantee those workers at least 2 weeks a year of paid vacation. Imagine that radical idea that workers should have a couple of weeks where parents can spend some quality time with their kids. And again, all over the industrialized world, they don't have 2 weeks. In fact, they usually have a lot more than that of vacation. All right, let me talk. When pollsters go out and they poll the American people, and they say, what is uppermost on your mind? What are you caring about the most? The answer is almost always a 4-letter word, J-O-B-S. And people understand that because, as I mentioned earlier, not only is real unemployment close to 11%, youth unemployment off the charts, people are scared to death. If you're 50, 55 years of age, you're worried about walking in to your job and finding that your job has disappeared and a young person has taken it. If you are young, you are desperately trying to find a career ladder, but you can't find your first job. In my view, the time is now to recognize that we do have a jobs crisis in America, that we need a major federal jobs program.
Yep.
Several months ago, I've introduced to the Senate, and we will implement from the White House, a jobs program which rebuilds our crumbling roads, bridges, should not be crumbling. Our rail system should not be behind Europe, Japan, and China. And if we invest $1 trillion in rebuilding that infrastructure, we become more productive, more efficient, safer, and we can create up to 13 million decent paying jobs. That we have got to deal with as a nation. It's not a sexy issue, but it is enormously important. And that is to understand that the trade policies that we have had in this country for decades have been a grotesque failure to the American Senator, I have voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, against permanent normal trade relations with China. Why? Because I understood, as I believe the vast majority of Americans understood, that the function of these trade agreements was to allow corporate America to shut down in America, outsource our jobs to low-wage countries, and bring their products back in here. In my view, if corporate America wants us to buy their products, the time is long overdue for them to start manufacturing those products here in the United States. Opposition in the Senate to this disastrous Trans-Pacific Alliance.
Woo! Thank you, Bernie!
TPP. It's not widely known. And we can go on for a long time. This is what I want to say. It is not just that the TPP and fast track would force American workers to compete against people in Vietnam who make 56 cents an hour minimum wage. It's beyond that. And I'll tell you a story which demonstrates what these trade agreements are all about. Involved and an integral part of this trade agreement is called an investor-state resolution process. Okay? What is that about? Right. This is what's about. Tiny country of Uruguay, a few years ago, had a president who was an oncologist, knew a lot about cancer. And what this guy tried to do, and did do, is work on very strong anti-tobacco legislation, trying to keep the kids of his country from smoking. I think that's a good thing. Given the fact that smoking causes a huge myriad of diseases, I applaud people who do that. Philip Morris, on the other hand, disagreed. What Philip Morris did is a result of trade language, which is included in the TPP, is went to an international tribunal and said to the tribunal, what Uruguay is doing is in violation of our trade agreement because they are harming our future profits. So Philip Morris said, look, we can make a lot of money by addicting children to nicotine and killing them over the years, and you are taking away our ability to hook kids on cigarettes. And what this trade agreement, we'll see how that resolves itself. It's now before a tribunal. Australia is in the same boat. But that tells you everything you need to know about these trade agreements. The bottom line, very clearly, is what is good for future profits is what trade agreements are about, not the health, not our environment, not the well-being of the people. And that is why we've got to defeat families. And telling you, if I haven't been blunt already, and tell you something I think many of you already know. And that is, as a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case. Make that loud so that Supreme Court hears you. The Supreme Court rendered one of the worst decisions in the history of our country. And what they said to the wealthiest people in this country, they said, okay guys, you already own much of America. We're now going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government. And people like the Koch brothers and Sheldon, great. What we always wanted to do, to own our government. And what Citizens United allowed is these people to spend billions of dollars to buy candidates who will make the rich richer and everybody else poor. And this issue of campaign finance reform is so important. It's important because it impacts every other issue of concern. If we have a Congress or governors or state legislatures that are owned by the billionaire class, we are not going to address the problems facing working families. I have so far made one promise in this campaign, one clear promise, and that is I will have a litmus test for my nominees to the Supreme Court. that they're going to rehear Citizens United and vote to overturn. I want to see a vibrant American democracy where we're not looking at 63% of the people not voting, we're looking at 90% of the people voting. I want to see a democracy when anybody, regardless of his or her views, who wants to run for office can run for office without being beholden to big money interests. And that is why after we overturn through a constitutional amendment to Citizens United, we move to public funding of elections. American democracy, and people did not fight and die for American democracy, to allow a situation to arise where the Koch brothers alone, second wealthiest family in America, extremely right-wing family, this family will spend more money on this election cycle than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Brothers and sisters, if you step back and you look at a situation like that, what you are not looking at, you're not looking at a democracy, you are looking at an oligarchic form of government. And we are not to stop. Being at a university, I now want to touch on another issue of just enormous consequence. In a highly competitive global economy, which is what we are in, we need the best educated workforce in the world. What that means is that we have got to encourage all of our people, and not just young people, middle-aged people, old people, to get all of the education they can, regardless of the income of their family. Think about where we are right now and the absurd situation that we currently exist right now in America. In a highly competitive global economy, hundreds of thousands of bright, young, qualified people who want to go to college or get a higher education are unable to do so, not because they lack the ability, but because they lack the money. Now, that is grossly unfair in terms of just taking away the ladder for those young people to make it into the middle class. But it is even worse than that when we look at our nation as a whole. What kind of insanity is it that we say to these people, we don't want you to become scientists or engineers or doctors or nurses because you just don't have the money. And that is why I have introduced legislation and will fight for that legislation as president that will make every public college and university in America tuition free. What that means. It's not only
Yes.
that it's going to make life easier for kids in high school who know that they can go to college. It will permeate all levels of education. Kids right now, I'm sure in Denver and Burlington, Vermont, who are in the 6th grade, they've gotten the message. Their family doesn't have a lot of money. They ain't going to make it to the middle class. They are not going to go to college. Why should they study hard? Why should they do their homework? But when we make it clear to every kid in this country that in fact if you work hard in school, you will be able to get a higher education, it will transform this kid.
Down with Common Core.
Now some people may think this is a radical idea. It is not a radical idea. It is the most common sense idea that we can think of. And let me tell you this, right now, countries like Germany, countries all over Scandinavia, even countries like Chile, they understand that their future rests in investing in their young people. We should we talk about higher education and higher education financing. We also have to understand that there are millions of young and middle-aged and not so middle-aged people who are today being crushed by horrendous student debt. A young man I know, not so young anymore, graduated law school deeply in debt. Today he is still paying that debt off at 9% interest rates. Now what sense does it make that you could go out and refinance your home today at 2%, 3%? You can buy a new car at 0%, 1%, but because you committed the crime of wanting to get an education, you're stuck for the rest of your lives at 8, 9%.
Wipe them out, Bernie. Wipe them out. Woo!
So part of that legislation will allow people who have student debt to refinance their student debt and lower interest rates. And what it also will do is end the absurdity of the federal government making billions in profit off of the interest rate paid by low-income